Hello dear learners, let me continue the discussion on administrative reforms. In the previous session, I have talked about the meaning, types of administrative reforms and also talked about some of the administrative reforms which have taken place in the past. I have already discussed about new public management and the related disadvantages, and then we talked about neo-Weberian state. In this class, I am going to continue the discussion on administrative reforms that have taken place over a period of time. The third type of the administrative reforms which are more prevalent are new public governance type. Now, the focus of new public governance is on horizontal arrangements than vertical structures for policy making and policy implementations. So, the idea here is the distribution of power. The focus is on distribution of power, that the public administration became one of the actors for policy design and implementation, let others also participate and contribute. In terms of bringing in the partners from the private sector, bringing in partners from the social enterprises sector, or you involve the citizens. So, a lot of collaboration in terms of policy making and the service delivery. So, now according in this particular new public governance reform, what is required is a lot of coordination and collaboration challenge, because there are multiple entities involved. Okay, I just mentioned about multiple actors, and public organizations are one of the actors of policy design, right? So, you are partnering with the private sector agencies, you are partnering with the social sector enterprises, you are partnering with the non-government organization, and also there are citizens involved, right? The idea is for the responsive administration, how government organizations are going to be responding to the needs and demands of the stakeholders that requires the collaborative effort and the coordinated effort of the multiple entities coming together, right? It also includes public participation and then the concept of hybrid governance. The governance in this case takes place through networks, because multiple entities involved, so governance is also taken care of through the networks. So, it requires highest level of cooperation amongst the various networks, that how they are going to make it happen that public policy delivery and the implementations of the public policy programs are effective and being taken care of, right? So, these are some of the processes and means and ends of the new public governance as administrative reform. Then the era of digital governance, digital era governance, and the focus of this particular reform is overcoming public administration problems through digital revolution. And in this case, I will be talking about the innovation in the public sector organization in module 12, wherein I have talked about the advent of technology and the implications of the technological environment and changes in technology, how it is impacting the functioning of the organization. I have talked about at length on digital public infrastructure and the application of various artificial intelligence technologies to help organizations sort their problems, right? So, this particular governance is basically focusing on overcoming public administration problem through digital revolution. Now, what is the meaning of digitalization? It's as considered a solution to take care of red tape and managerial inefficiency. So, when you take help of the technology to streamline the processes, there are least bureaucratic delays, there is no red tapeism. So, ultimately the managerial inefficiencies are taken care of, because people are getting access to services in a least possible time. The things are becoming more transparent. Let us take an example of procuring certificates from the government offices. So, if you have to do it manually, there are a lot of delays. You have to run from office to office and the rules and regulation. So, once it has gone online with the help of digitalization and the platforms like DigiLocker and the other platforms which can provide you the access to your important certificates. Let's talk about the UPIs for the online transaction. So, when the process have gone online, it has already increased a lot of transparency and trust among the citizens for the government, right? So, digitalization, it actually considered a solution to take care of these inefficiencies. It says that it's an efficient and effective delivery of public service in terms of more transparency and trust. more customized policies as per the needs of the citizens, because the feedback is gathered through citizens participation and big data. A lot of data is being collected, right, through the My Government platform, social media platforms. So the citizens are becoming more and more vocal about the government actions in terms of decision taken in the past, policy design and implementation, and how effective are their programs. So all things are being closely watched, and people are talking about it. So in a way, it also provides government with lot of information in terms of feedback, which can be looped back then into the process of reviving the system, public policy, program and delivery, right. So it actually changed the way in which citizens and government interact with each other. It is a changed relationship because of digitalization. That's the effect of digital era governance as the administrative reforms. Now what is happening is there's another important jargon which is being talked about is public value management. It says that, of course, we are focusing on the processes to revive the system, to redesign, to have a relook at the system, but what is the value that is being created for the public at large, right? So the public management as a important reform concept, or a key term which is being used these days, is a focus on creation of public value. And I say that public managers should play an active role in identifying and pursuing opportunities to enhance public value, right. So if you can recall, I have discussed a paper by Professor Mark Moore in module 1. Professor Mark Moore also have talked about at length and also published some papers and the text on public value management. So I suggest learners to actually refer to the work of Professor Mark Moore in terms of understanding how public value is created, and what is the role of public managers, and how they should possibly play an active role in looking for and pursuing the opportunities which can help in creating the value for the public, right. So these are the 4 broad domains which I have talked about in terms of the administrative reforms happened over the time. But if you look at in today's context, we don't have any single administrative reform with a strong focus, but in fact we have multiple aspects or key components which are available in literature, like governance mechanism, collaborations, networks, partnership, creating value, digitalization of the public service and utility, and so on and so forth, right. Let's look into the process of administrative reform in a very simple way, and the reference is from Seiden 2014, which is entitled Administrative Reforms Comes of Age. Now, Seiden proposed following 4 stages in the process of administrative reforms: when it initiated, how the design takes place, what is the implementation, and what is the evaluation like. Now, the first stage as proposed in the process of administrative reform is to do with identification and awareness of need of change. Is there a need of change? How will be identified? First of all, one has to be convinced that there is some sense of wrong. Something is not good, it is inefficient, and one has to be aware about why that change is required, what is the problem with the system, right. At the same time, also awareness of the remedial action, that if something is wrong, can this be relooked at, can it be revised. So there is also awareness of remedial action. And also you say that who are the people who will be bringing this kind of awareness? People who are inspired to look into and bringing in changes. People who are accustomed to the way of working in a traditional manner, they will not be able to bring in those kind of changes and creating awareness for the need of change. These are the people who are actually dissatisfied with the system, who are actually not happy with the way organization function. It can be inside the organization or outside the organization. So these are the people who will actually initiate that process of change. So flash of inspiration is important. Okay, and also these people, this in terms of identification and awareness of the need of change, there also should be a vision that there is something better than the existing state. So we want to go from one particular state to the another state, which is of course higher level state. So we need to see that this particular state is a better state than the existing state. So we should have a vision of that particular state to to initiate the process of change, or identification the need for change, or creating awareness that the change is required, right? Now, once the identification and awareness for the need of change is there, the second step that the author proposed is diagnosing and devising appropriate remedies. So you have to go in depth analysis of the wrong causes so that you can actually differentiate symptoms from the actual problems. We have to actually look at that we need to really tap the problems, not take care of the symptoms, right? So in-depth analysis of the wrong or causes has to be find out, and then accordingly proposing appropriate strategies and remedies. It is a very crucial for the organization to take into the processes, to have the system in place to look into this, how they will perform. People who have already initiated the process of change, they get into the process of in-depth analysis of wrong causes, because if you are not doing the analysis properly, ultimately what happens is you may be solving the kind of issues which are not actually the problems. You are thinking of something else as a problem, but problem lies somewhere else. So you have to do this process and accordingly think of the appropriate strategies and remedies. Third, the process of the administrative reform is about implementation. Now you have already performed the in-depth analysis. You also have the appropriate the strategies for improving that particular problem that you have identified, or solving a problem. This time for implementation. Now in this case, three important things that you have to take care. First of all, what is the scope of reforms, in terms of bringing in change? What is the scope of the change in terms of results? What it can do when you put in these reforms in place? What is that you can expect? What is the scope of reform? Because if you are not able to justify what is the scope of reform, ultimately it will be very difficult for to convince people that those reforms are really required, right? So you, as a public organization, the government organizational setting, you have much more justification to be given to the stakeholders who are to be affected with the change that you are going to do. So the scope of reforms is very important in terms of implementation, and hence you get this source of support for this reforms. So how good you are in getting the what we'll say support from the people is how you convince people about the scope of the reforms. And what are the channels of implementations? Are you getting the support from the top level? Is the political authorities there, or some people are very eager to bring in those changes? So that also matters in terms of implementation. Somebody in the position is supporting you, that's also matter in terms of how implementations can be smooth, or can go back to the square one if it is not supported really well, right? Once it is done, evaluation is the fourth stage, which is again a very important stage, but it also has its own challenges that we are going to look into. Evaluation, it's about proving that after the reforms, the improvement that has taken place is basically a result of reforms. So it's basically about cause and effect relationship, and this is the method which has the problem. How do one ensure that the improvement that the government organizations has achieved, it is because of the reforms which have introduced? Because the reforms implementation will take time in order to realize the results of those reforms, and by the time you tend to realize the result, the people who actually initiated those reforms are no longer in the picture there, right? And at the time, maybe the other reforms are required to be done, right? So perhaps what has worked before might not work today, and what has worked today might not work in times to come. So evaluation is a tricky component of the administrative reform, because there are methodological difficulties in measurement, and also there are long time lags for the full implementation and effect of the reforms. So these are the four broad categories of the administrative reforms in terms of the process as Seiden proposed. Let's have a quick review of the first stage is on identification and awareness of the need for change. Then diagnosing and devising appropriate remedies. Third is implementation and then finally evaluation, right? So please go to this particular chapter of this particular text to find out more about various examples are being quoted. The details of these points are also have been given. So because I have to cover a lot of things, I am just giving you the brief of the process here. You can go back and refer to this particular text to get more clarity on your understanding of process of administrative reform, right? Now comes to the point of while implementation of the administrative reforms and their acceptance, there are also the problems, obstacles to the administrative reforms, in terms of their implementations, applicability and their acceptance. The reasons are broadly categorized into these 5 categories I have listed here. Again, the reference is from Sidon. The reason could be geographical, is the size of country and the scattered settlement, because of which there could be some challenges with respect to the implementation of or the acceptance or adoption of the administrative reforms, right? For example, if some reforms has happened in any other country, maybe having the smaller size, and if the replication is to be done of those reforms in a bigger country in terms of size, so geographical the reasons become obstacle for those administrative reforms because of that, right? Historical, the organizations have learned the ways of working in a particular way. They are accustomed and then they learned the ways in which they are continuing to working. So there is some kind of inertia which can then hinder or act as an obstacle in the way of organizational reforms. And also the organizations have actually a failure in the past reforms, and the reforms has not yielded success. The organization has already, or the public management or the government has already seen the failures. So these are the historical the angles, or the, I will say, reasons because of which the administrative reforms are not well accepted, or are these are the hurdles which can come in front of the administrative reforms implementation. Then there is a cultural aspect, a lot of diversity, people coming from different viewpoints, different backgrounds. And if you think about India as a country which has a huge diversity, you see that multiple perspective, people coming from different backgrounds, culture, races, ethnicity, right, with a lot of religious beliefs and cultural background. So different perspectives are there. And then of course there are linguistic barriers, and of course corruption is a part of risk in the public organizations and the government. I'm not saying corruption is happening, but the idea is people link usually the corruption and there's a risk that this can be there. So there's also some kind of cultural barriers to the implementation of administrative reforms which can actually act as obstacles for the application. Then there is economics. There are scarcity of resources. We have limited resources. There is also lack of incentives which can actually help the administrative reform taken a shape and reinforced with the help of the incentives. And of course resources are scarce because of which implementations can take time, and they can also put a lot of hurdles in terms of administrative reform implementation. Then the final reasons of obstacles to the administrative reforms are political. For example, lack of consensus. Political authorities not in alignment with the what organizational changes are being proposed by the public organization. There could be insecure officials because they have fear that if something changes, they might lose power or their way of functioning will have to change. There are a rigid constitutional arrangement which sometimes doesn't allow changes to happen, and of course then there is bureaucracy, unnecessary delays, red tapeism, and a lot of managerial inefficiencies. So these are the broad categories of the reasons which are highlighted as obstacles to the administrative reforms. So what we have done is we have discussed about the process of administrative reform, and then followed by the discussion on the obstacles which are put to the administrative reforms in the system, right? So what I will do is I will stop here. I will continue because the next session I am going to talk about the organizational life cycle and stages. So in this sessions, 2 sessions, what the focus was on? The focus was on administrative reform understanding and looking at the a track of the periodic reforms that had happened in the different periods, and what were the features and outcomes of those reforms, what was the process of reform in terms of implementation and evaluation, and obstacles to administrative reforms. Now after this, the next sessions in this week are going to be focused on the organizational life cycle and stages, and then we look into the planned change, how organization respond to change, overcoming resistance to change, and patterns of successful change, why organizations fail and why change they fail. We will look into some of the research insights, right? So I will see you in the next session with the organizational life cycle and stages.